So some networking principles for you to consider for the new normal. So the first is that it's about people, not transactions. Now, this is a little bit of an overused term and you might think, that's a bit daggy. Even though we think that we care about people and we're having conversations to keep up relationships, some of that is true and some of it is we've got this agenda that we're holding on to. I recently listened to an excellent podcast, which was an interview between a management consultant coach who's quite successful around the globe, getting people into top positions in top management consulting firms such as BCG, etc. And he interviewed one of his students who had been successful in getting an interview, asking him about his networking techniques and what had worked for him. And it was interesting that the student observed that while he didn't have a large network to begin with and had very little relevant experience, what got him that interview was a post-it note on his resume that said, from somebody, in the firm, somebody senior in the firm, that said, check out this guy's resume. So, and what he was saying was that came from multiple conversations where he reached out to influential people and asked them questions about their work and about, issues to do with how he could contribute. So he was basically asking for advice and for insight into the industry. And just by doing that, he started to develop these great relationships and to be able to demonstrate what he knew as well in order to then eventually get that interview. And he remarked that people are not stepping stones along the career path. Same thing really, if you're looking at people as potential clients or referral sources, we can sometimes, when we're rushed or we are stressed about making sales, be a little bit transactional in that approach. So we need to move right away from that now. The second one is about real listening, and it might seem obvious, but I think listening it's been a real disservice to all the talk about active listening, because active listening, that's when you are listening and then afterwards you say, well, what I hear you say is, and you check in. But that's really only one level of listening. I recently read an excellent book by Kate Murphy called You're Not Listening. And she says that she's a journalist, so she's had a lot of experience listening to people's stories. And she said that so many people ended up saying things that were really interesting or deeply personal that she may not have even been meaning to talk about. She wasn't trying to get that out of them, but they opened up and they were real with her and connected with her because she was listening so carefully. She says that listening is really being listened to is the experience of being experienced. Now, how often can we say that when we listen to people, we're experiencing them, we're giving them that gift? And she also says that people are so unused to being listened to that they would often remark to her that she really was someone who was a great listener and they hadn't really been heard like that for a long time. People fundamentally want to be seen and heard, and yet we don't really do that often. So imagine the power of being fully present and suspending your agenda long enough to just hear what comes out in an open way. The third principle for your new networking is service calls, not sales calls. Again, you might have heard this expression before. So most of us hate the sales call unless we're in sales or we've done a lot of sales training. And it really is much more effective when your conversation is about helping the other person and talking through their problem. Having an attitude of curiosity and helpfulness of taking the time for them. And so that probably means fewer conversations, but deeper conversations. And if you combine that with then continuing that relationship over time without a very narrow agenda, without it being transactional, it's likely to bear fruit in different ways over time. So it's not a quick fix, unfortunately, but it is very meaningful. The fourth one is about shaping those conversations. So I mentioned the call with the person who was looking for a job at a top consulting firm. Whatever the purpose is for your call or your conversation, if you prepare and shape that really well, and that's actually going to lead to a much better result on both sides. confidence in a conversation with someone doesn't just come from knowing your stuff or knowing more than them on a particular topic. It comes from planning the flow of the conversation. What is it that you want to achieve in that conversation? And it also comes from asking good questions and making comments that resonate with that person by having done some research beforehand on that person, and also thinking about what are the best questions to ask them and having them noted down before the conversation. It's also about having a style that's natural, clear, succinct, and easy, so not grasping. So if you are hoping to get a commitment out of someone after a conversation, you're not sort of putting everything on that. Yes, you are flowing towards, this is how I could help you, and having that conversation, but it's not about grasping onto that outcome. And the fifth principle, and I have taken a little bit of time on this, but I think that they're really important underlying concepts, is to have a streamlined strategy. So many people I've worked with on their marketing, whether it's for their business or for their personal brand, have tried lots of different things, maybe tried lots of things not very well, or really had a go at a few things, but not necessarily known why they're doing them. They haven't gone back to a clear strategy that comes from their particular objectives, their particular audience, and the brand messages for that audience. So you really need to go back to those basics first, and then cut out all the stuff that you think you should be doing or that you're told you should be doing, and just pick a few things that are going to work really, really well based on these principles.